Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about how to incorporate flooring sales into real estate transactions. And I'm excited to introduce my guest, Christy, and an additional guest, Kylee, that will be joining us when she does. But first, just wanted to ask you guys to click over to StreamYard and authorize for your comments to display your name. StreamYard is the broadcasting platform that we use, and that just allows us to see who is saying what when you're saying it. So go ahead and do that, and then pop into the comments to let us know you're here. And my first guest is Christy Meaux. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Christy. So glad to have you here.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here with everyone today. Like Michelle said, my name is Christy Meaux. I am a mortgage broker with Edge Home Finance and also an entrepreneur and a few other adventures that I have going this year. Thrilled to be here with each of you. I've been in business for 5 years as an originator. Was actually in mortgage a few years ago, back in 08 and 09 with doing sales and marketing. So I've been in the realm of mortgage, being creative and finding ways to make money work at the closing table for clients, buyers, sellers, just creating a cohesive experience all throughout the transaction for everyone. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all today and excited to answer your questions.
Thank you, Christy. So just kind of a quick rundown of what it looks like to do pay at closing type deals for flooring retailers. Within every real estate transaction, there are two sides of it. There's the buyer side and the seller side. So Christy as a lender is on the buyer side of the transaction. Your entry point to quoting the flooring and putting together the contract that goes to the closing table is the real estate agent. But not all real estate agents even understand how to structure a flooring credit, right, Christy?
Right. Yeah. I actually had someone, it's not necessarily flooring, but I had a foundation issue, which is going to be very similar to a flooring settlement, in a transaction, a real estate transaction.
Right. So a lot of times when you're partnering with realtors, you can be a real asset and an extension of their team by helping them to understand how these types of credits are facilitated. And although you want to partner closely with real estate agents, your real partners in building the deal are the lenders and the title company reps, the closing officers, right? So let's walk through a scenario if you're doing a flooring credit to the buyer side of the deal. So you connect with the real estate agent or the buyer, and they say, we want to buy this home at 123 Street, but we want the seller to provide a credit to us for whatever it's going to cost to replace this horrific carpet. So the flooring company comes in and assembles a quote, and then the buyer brings that to where, Christy?
So the buyer can bring it in a few different ways, or the seller actually. Mm-hmm. So they can loop it into a reduction of the purchase price so that the buyer is able to save some of their down payment or closing costs to go toward a flooring replacement. The seller can also extend a seller credit, and depending on the type of loan that they get, conventional, VA, FHA, there's an appropriated allowance of gift funds or seller credit that is allowed in that situation. Mm-hmm. So say a seller wants to offer $10,000 to offset the cost of a flooring replacement. That's great. The buyer at that point can either allocate that money toward a rate buy down and then save themselves the out-of-pocket money that they would bring for closing costs, down payment, rate buy down. All of that cash to close can be saved by a seller credit.
Mhm.
That way the buyer has that money still in their bank account to do whatever they wish with the flooring scenario.
Mhm.
Now, if the seller has already met that allowable gift amount or concession, but there still needs to be more money exchanged toward the flooring replacement. And this is where title can come in and help structure this appropriately. However, what that looks like is the title company can do a seller holdback to where they're going to hold the money that's allocated for the repair.
Mhm.
And then the repair happens after closing. And with provided receipts that are signed off by each party, the title company then distributes that money and pays the vendor directly.
Mhm.
So the buyer's not actually touching that money, but they're still getting the results that they want from the seller without it being technically part of the mortgage transaction.
Right. But the first person you want to run that past is your lender. If you're
Yes.
if the buyer is going to have a mortgage to purchase the home, you prepare the quote and you say, give this to your lender. And then the lender will push that whichever direction it needs to go. If it lands at title, and in the situation that Christy described, you become a vendor of the title company. And the day of closing, you get a check from the title company.
Correct.
And that check is usually 100%. It's not a deposit, it's 100% of the flooring purchase. If there's anything over that amount, the buyer may add on additional pieces to the project. If it's anything under that amount, round up, it's not supposed to go back to the buyer, those funds.
Yes, correct. Correct.
So,
it's just less out of pocket for the seller at that point.
Mm-hmm. So that is the buyer side. On the seller side, if they wanted to, say, make a deal with a flooring retailer because they know that they have to update their flooring in order to get the best possible price for their house, they can have it quoted, have it repaired, and negotiate a pay at close. Where once the house is sold and they have the proceeds from that, they can then go and pay the flooring retailer for the improvement to the house.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
is a quick rundown of both sides of it. Anything to add to those scenarios, Kirsty, before we open it up for questions on how this looks?
So I would recommend, and this has been such a huge component of my business as I was getting started in a new town with a new license, and I had to make my way in this industry as a woman, even very competitive. It was
Mhm.
pre-COVID, and things were a lot different than what they are now, but we were serious networkers. And I knew that I had to show up to be known and learn who I wanted to align my business with, which I think is a huge component in the measure of success and, is absolutely relevant to you and your industry. What I would recommend is there are real estate specific groups that you can align with. Women's Council of Realtors has networks all over the United States. Very easy to find. They have state groups, they have local community groups all over. So Women's Council of Realtors is going to be a really great asset for you. But look and see what other real estate groups, there's always opportunities for sponsorships with title companies. Align with them and build a trusted network, because I guarantee you, realtors are always asking for recommendations for flooring. They're always going, and we're going to see a lot more real estate transactions happening in the next couple of years, especially as people start to tap into the equity in their home and doing refinances. They're going to want to pull cash out and do those updates that they've been waiting on because of where the economy is. So don't count yourself out if people are not moving, because they still have equity and an opportunity to build and create their dream space.
Yeah, that brings up another good point, Christy, because how often do homeowners come just directly to you and say, we want to make some improvements. What can we do?
It happens. And I've gotten really good at seeing conversations happening on social media where someone will say, hey, or they'll post something like, oh, I love this look. Check this Pinterest out. And you're like, hey, do you know you can pull the equity out of your house at a lower interest rate than a credit card payment or a home equity loan? Like those are the more expensive, higher interest solutions to this issue. So build the relationships with the people in your communities that create and say, hey, I really want to go after people who are going to be refinancing and show them how to use money pulled out of the equity of their home. The refi doesn't cost them anything out of pocket. It's all rolled into the cost of the loan, number one. So they're not using any of their money toward a refi. They're pulling cash out in their pocket to pay off higher debt and also create the spaces that they want to be. They've had plenty of time to think about it. Home improvement, DIY stuff is all the rage right now. You guys know as well as anybody else. We're seeing it multiply even on network channels. So finding ways to get creative to make your business a value, an added value to create space and harmony. More people working from home, more people want craft space, more people want flex space. You guys have the solutions to make all of that possible. And with working with a lender, part of my conversation is, hey, yeah, I'm absolutely going to love helping you with that. We can, do you need help figuring out what solution is going to be best? What are you planning to do with your refinance? Are you doing a cash out? Because if you do a cash out, you can pay down debt and do those updates. I've got a great flooring connection I would love to pair you with. Feel free to explore those options as well. It's a very easy conversation.
So in addition to knowing the realtors, you want to connect with the lenders in your area. And we are missing our title company gal. I'm going to check in on her later and make sure that she's okay. But in that very same way, it's fantastic to make connections with title companies. They have such an enormous reach when it comes to educating realtors, making connections for realtors. So visiting their offices and getting to know them at networking events and within those Women's Council of Realtors is a really good one that Christy mentioned is a good idea. I'm on a little delay here, but I was going to share a comment from Mr. Roland Thompson. One big thing for a dealer, a flooring dealer, is to understand working with them, realtors. They need fast service. That's true. That's true. They are on a timeline. You are right. And so if you can figure out how to work as an extension of their team and meet and adjust to your guys' project management to meet their schedule, I think you can become a really strong asset for them and really solidify those relationships. One thing that you can work out in the planning process is figure out how to, and buyers love this, figure out how to install the flooring like the moment that ownership changes hands so that by the time their moving boxes get there, whenever that schedule follows the flooring installation. So timing is a critical component. And you guys can we are doing questions and answers. So you guys, if you have any questions come up, can post them there in the comments. Hi, Rachel. Rachel is sharing the link to the Women's Council of Realtors, which is national. So you guys can find one in your local area, a group to be a part of. And this is being recorded. So if you want to share it with somebody that's not here, you can catch the replay on our YouTube channel. And we may have some follow-up conversations because I'm not seeing a lot of questions right now, guys, for as much demand as there was for this conversation. So please chime in. One question that I got quite a bit talking about doing this with you, Christy, was how does the flooring retailer adapt their contract if it has something to do with a real estate deal? So what I said was it's another form of payment possibly, but your contract stays the same.
And that honestly would be something to get clarification on with your local title agents. I went through 2 or 3 whenever I was seeking clarification around the foundation questions that my client had. I recommended getting, you're going to give quotes without getting contracts. It's part of the business. I do it in my business. I get applications and they go somewhere else. Unfortunately, I wish that we had a more confident and secure way to offer services. But I also feel like if your service is the right match for what the client needs, then that's a great fit. Everybody's going to move forward. You're going to be able to ask for referrals and continue building your business from that aspect. As far as the contract goes, that's really going to be between the individual that's paying for the service, whether it be the buyer or the seller. You've got to figure out what that looks like. And if you don't already, which I'm sure the majority of you do, make sure you're getting your contracts reviewed by a legal expert that's going to help protect you and your business. If you do, say you get a deposit for a quote, perhaps say, you're going to do $100 to get a quote. That $100, once we come and do the flooring install, will be applied toward that flooring solution, so that you're not necessarily going in there for free. You are getting some money up front, and understood that $100 is not going back to the client if they do not choose you. Incentives work like that all the time in trade businesses. So perhaps that might be something to explore. Don't quote me on it. That is definitely not my wheelhouse.
Right.
I'm only trying to be creative so everyone gets the best opportunity in every solution.
I think that's a great idea. And I am not a lawyer, so I would say the same thing. Take the contract that you have or the contract that you're coming up with and take it to a lawyer. You can take it to your lawyer, your business attorney. There's also lawyers that are specialized in real estate and even act as the title company and close homes or advise on real estate deals. So you could even find one that has that area of expertise, just to make sure that you're covered on both sides of that.
Sure. And there's a question there about a FHA 203K loan. If you guys aren't familiar, those are going to be the rehab loans, the fix and flips. 203K for a buyer will roll the cost of the renovation into the cost of the loan. So it's one loan. You get a loan on the expected quote, the amount of the repairs that are needed. The contractors are vetted ahead of time. They don't just turn money over to buyers, say, hey, well, you said you were going to use this for renovation, and now you can do whatever you want with it. If that's the approach that the buyer wants to take, they're better off doing a regular loan and go getting a home equity loan. You can do whatever you want with home equity money, but they've got to have 20% equity in the house in order to do that, especially in Texas. That's where I'm based out of. So we have the 50 AC, which means in order to pull any money out of a real estate transaction, you have to have that 20% equity in the house. But for home improvement, absolutely, the cost of flooring can be rolled into that. They just need a standard quote saying, hey, this is what they plan to do. This is what the scope of work looks like. That will have to be turned in with the loan application. Let's see, how to make sure the seller pays the bill if the house does not sell.
That sounds like a contract
issue
to me. Yeah, spell that out in your contract. What are the terms of this type of deal? Run it past your attorney or whatever advisor you utilize to come up with those contractual terms and conditions.
Yeah, definitely put that there. Do we do the install after closing? Christina, I would say 9 times out of 10, if title is going to be paying and reimbursing or paying out of the seller net proceeds for the cost of the flooring, then yes, the flooring will be done post-closing so that the house, they have to do a walkthrough inspection prior to closing. And that walkthrough inspection basically says the house is in good standing. There's nothing iffy or sketchy or nothing has changed since they went under contract. I would then give a time frame upon the quote saying this quote is good for X number of days at this cost. That way, if the cost of supplies increases, labor goes up, or the scope of work changes, then it's all going to be covered by that contract and the verbiage that is contained within. So make sure that your timelines are appropriate. Make sure that they are very detailed, saying closing on this date, we will start work on this date and be completed by this date.
And then we have another question related to making sure you get paid. Most times title company is picked by the buyer. If there is no buyer, what precautions do we need to take? So if you're working with the seller and you're installing flooring as a service provider to them, then it would need to state in your contract what would happen if there was no buyer for the house. But we're seeing houses move pretty rapidly right now, right, Christy?
Average on market days, it's a weird season right now. Everybody's just gone back to school. We're going into fourth quarter. That's going to typically slow down for the real estate market. However, I've had more application activity within the past 2 weeks than I had in the previous 2 months. So and I mentioned this to you offline a minute ago. I feel like consumers are getting more comfortable in accepting where we are as far as interest rates and inflation goes. I feel like a lot of people have been waiting to see if rates are going to come down before jumping into the market to move. Real estate is always going to be the roller coaster, right? You can't have a steady state for real estate. It doesn't feed the economy well that way. So we're in a down market right now. We absolutely expect all of these things to start coming up, especially with 2024 being an election year. They want to have a strong economy coming into the election year, and they also want to be very consumer friendly. No matter what side of the coin anybody is on, I'm not giving political opinion. It is fact whenever we go into a political year with an election, especially presidential election, a lot of focus is put on the strength of the economy and inflation, where people are getting hit most. And right now we're getting hit in the pocketbook big time. Yeah. So you can see it. Interest rates on credit cards are the highest that they have ever been. And mortgage rates are still under 10%. That's a big win. I know it doesn't feel like it coming out of 2.5% to 3% interest rates on mortgages, but we'll get back down probably in the 5s by the end of next year is what we're expecting to be closer to that 5, high 4s, mid 5s at that point. But we're still going to see people moving and taking advantage of opportunities. People are going to need to pay off debt. People are going to want to make those big upgrades. It's an ebb and flow, and we have to be ready for it.
So some up and down, proceed with caution, definitely. Roland, again, is mentioning that when you're working with the person selling, you need to have the go-to products you can get fast at a great price. When working with the buyer, it's a great time to do upgrades. Relationship with the agent is key. Yes.
So true, Roland.
Yeah. And Michael says, is it still possible for buyer in their offer ask for seller to pay closing costs or simply cash back at closing?
So typically it's going to mean the assumption is if a seller is giving a seller credit, that's going to be how it's verbalized, right? They're going to say, hey, we would like seller credit or seller concessions of X amount or X percent. It's like on a standard conventional less than 20% down, a buyer can get 3% seller credit on a conventional deal. If they have over 20% down, they can go up to 6%. FHA is 6%. So you can say, hey, I want a full 6% seller credit on this deal. and start there and probably work down. Or if the inspection comes back, there's a laundry list of things that need to be updated and repaired, but the seller is not in a position with their current finances to pay out of pocket prior to closing to fix those things. Those seller credits can be given in cash to offset the closing costs to help the buyer remedy those items.
Thank you, Michael. And Jennifer is here. Hi, Jennifer. Can a retailer just go directly to the seller through their, or can a retailer just go directly to the seller through their realtor and draw the contract up with them? And when the house closes, the seller writes a check to the retailer.
So that's going to be more of a title question, simply because there is an agreement that once the house changes possession, legally, the seller doesn't have anything to do with the property. So that's why title will hold back the funds that are given to the seller out of the net proceeds once they have a quote, an expected cost of the flooring being completed. Then title pays that money directly to the flooring retailer instead of to the seller. And if there's anything left in that bucket, say the flooring wasn't as expensive as the quote stated, then the remaining money then goes back to the seller.
I'm thinking along the lines of the contract terms. Say there was a seller in a market where the average days listed was like 32 days, and they wanted the flooring before the listing photos. Could the retailer provide that with like net 60? So, okay, the average is 32 days. This bill is due to us in 60. Or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, if the flooring repair is done prior to closing, that's really going to be your call. I mean, if I was a seller and the buyer had agreed to get a flooring concession after closing and they're ready to go under contract already, I'm tending to think, now, this is my opinion. Don't take this to heart. But my opinion is, then let the buyer go choose the flooring that they want based on the quote that's been provided, stating that this is what the seller is willing to give toward this repair. Because otherwise, the seller goes in, and this actually happened to my mom when she was selling a house in the 80s. Now it's been a while. But she had gone in and replaced the linoleum all through the house that she was in. The guy that bought it came in, ripped down a wall that she had just had painted, and ripped up all the flooring that she had just put into the house and changed it to something totally different. So,
and have you seen like some variation of that several times in your career since then?
Yeah. I mean, I know I've heard about it. I don't see as many houses as what my realtors do, but I bet the folks here have seen that happen.
Yeah, I think that's pretty commonplace. So good advice. Don't put your heart and soul into the selection of the flooring if you're the seller. Rachel, what's up, bestie? She says, if I'm a flooring retailer and I want to try this for the first time, what's my very first step? How do I not get burned? Good question. So the real estate agents are the ones that have the everyday interactions with people that want to sell their homes, and the everyday interactions with people that are going to look at homes that are listed for sale as buyers. So I do think they're your entry point, even though your real partners end up being the lender and the title company, because they're the ones that get down to the transactional components of how the deal gets pieced together.
Yeah, so I'll give you my opinion here. And I agree with you, Michelle. Rachel, you're definitely going to, and I'm going to even take it a step further, Start making appointments and going to coffees and lunches. I know it sounds overhyped, but add value and build relationships with the realtors who are doing this stuff in your client, in your environment, in your community. You want to have these realtors advocating for you, because every buyer goes in and says, oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. And they start picturing what their house will look like when they're doing a walkthrough and looking at homes. So if you have a realtor that has your card in their back pocket and says, hey, I know a great flooring retailer, let me get you connected. That's your first step. But get to know the realtors, start adding values, start showing up to any of the networking events that are hyped in your neighborhood. That's really, it's all about relationships. And I cannot stress that enough. I do not buy leads. I do not do Zillow. I don't play in the pond. There's so many people doing that. I want to build the relationship with the people I'm working with. And that just adds so much value. I can't stress it enough. So I think, the relationship piece is, it'll build itself. And when your realtor is going in and, to the not getting burned part, I understand that. When realtors are so good at contracts, if they are with a reputable broker, they have legal resources on staff. And saying, hey, how do I put this flooring piece into the addendum for my contract so that my buyers get what they want and the seller is happy too? So that's an extension of protection for you there.
Really good advice. And a lot of these national brokerages and even smaller firms are going to have some type of legal support to where they can help you to put this together. So even if you're just getting started and this is something you're not sure how to offer in your market, you could just, as you're developing relationships with real estate agents, say, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I would like to build a program for agents like you and work together to kind of assemble the pieces of this type of deal.
Yeah, I would even say post it on your Facebook, on your personal Facebook page, saying, hey, who are my realtors here? I have a couple questions and I'd love to connect with you. You'll get every single realtor who sees that post put their name, hey girl, hey, and probably 20 messages in your inbox. But that's your network.
Yep. Totally agree. So I hope that answers your question, Rachel. And it looks like we've gotten through all the questions that we have so far. But if you have any afterthoughts or follow-up questions, or you find yourself in this process and need some support, we'll continue to monitor the comments on this video and provide whatever support or connections we can. I know Christy does lending all across the country, so she can be a resource, and we have some other professionals in our network that can support you in that process as well. And she posted her email in the comments. Can you put these tips into a guide or document?
We can definitely get something together for you, Rachel.
Yes, we can. So we will share that here when we put it together. Thank you for asking, Rachel. All right. So I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, Christy.
It was my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed this so much.
So good to see you. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.